STS-27 was my third launch, and it was only the second launch after the Challenger accident. Well, I will never forget, we maneuvered the arm, and Mike Mullane was my arm operator, so he moved the arm over there, and we brought up the television image of the right wing, and I looked at what I was seeing, and I said to myself, we are gonna die.
Clarence E. Bud Anderson is a retired United States Air Force colonel and World War II fighter pilot. At age 98, he is our country's ranking living fighter ace with 16 and a quarter air victories flying the P-51 Mustang over Germany and Europe. After the war, he spent most of his 30-year Air Force career as a test pilot. His last assignment was as wing commander of a tactical fighter wing in Vietnam. He is highly decorated and an inductee of the National Aviation Hall of Fame. Colonel, why is it important for us to commemorate VE Day 75 years later?
World War II was a big deal. They had these two dictators in Europe that decided they're going to conquer Europe and enslave the people, put them to work. So it was a grave situation. And I think most Americans knew that. But once Japan attacked the United States at Pearl Harbor, the country had a transformation, as I recall, and saying, oh my goodness, this really is serious. The country got behind the government, and but the tremendous manufacturing capability was mobilized, and everybody was working towards winning the war. And our country became very patriotic. Everybody wanted to know what was going on in the war. Everybody had somebody in the service. And I think, well, you know, they called it the greatest generation, but we were all just doing what we knew we had to do. The whole thing of World War II needs to be remembered. It was just a different time, and I don't think we'll see it again.
If there is such a thing as a regular mission, please describe one. How many aircraft, what types, and what were the missions?
I would say there is no typical mission. It would be like playing cards. You know, you get a hand, and you got to deal with it the way, you know, what's in your hand. But in general, I could tell you, most of our missions were escorting the B-17s and B-24s over Germany. We were transferred to the 8th Air Force. Let's say a mission to Berlin, perhaps. We had a B-17 group very close to us, and we could hear them taking off while we're still in bed. So we'd go to the big briefing, and then we'd find out where we're going. Then you started the engine up on start engine time, and you taxied out, and then you looked for your flight to come by. Then you taxied out and got in position. Here we are now. We're taxiing out 16 airplanes, and probably had 2 spares behind that. and then the leader would set course. We'd fly kind of line of rest on a straight course towards our rendezvous with the bombers. Say mid summer of '44, you could have 800 to 1,000 bombers, and they'd be in a long stream. You know, just once you joined it, it was as far as the eye could see. And especially if they were pulling contrails, it was a very impressive sight. And then we'd pull up at the rendezvous point, and then remember the B-17s, B-24s on their tail. They had these big emblems, a square D or a triangle J, big letters up on the vertical stabilizers. Then we would set up a zigzag course across the top of them to keep our speed up. We were generally flying, well, of course, well above 25,000 feet. The bombers were between 20 and 25. And we'd, sometimes you'd be up at 30, 36, 37, trying to get on top of the overcast. And it's minus 50 up there. The P-51 did not have a good heater. It had a little dinky tube that was over your right leg up near the bottom of the instrument panel, and it had the words heat on it. But the only way I conquered it, I finally found we got some issue bomber boots. I could stay pretty warm. We had people like to know in that time, you know, what do you do if you have to go? And we did have a relief tube on it, but I never used it because of such a high altitude. Sometimes that thing would, it was down under your seat. You could bring it out, and it was a tube, but it would ice up, and you'd end up with a. We were young. We had pretty good bladders, so if you didn't drink a lot of coffee beforehand, I could make it. And depending on what time after January of '44, we pretty much had free range. Doolittle had turned us loose, so let us follow the enemy down to the ground.
Jimmy Doolittle is known for that daring B-25 1942 air raid on Tokyo. But how profound an effect did he also have on the air war over Germany a couple of years later?
General Doolittle was my personal heroes. When we first got over there, the 8th Air Force in November of '43, the 8th Air Force was in trouble with the bombing. They thought that they could go over there in these large formations by themselves. They didn't even need fighter escort. Remember, we call them the Flying Fortress. Fight its way in, fight its way out. Well, they forgot to tell the Luftwaffe about it, and they were taking a tremendous toll. And they finally had to have a bombing halt in late '43. So they told us how to escort. They wanted us to stay close to the bombers. They wanted us to fly over the top, around them. They wanted to see you. They wanted us close. That, as it turned out, that wasn't the best way to do it. They said, when the enemy attacks the B-17s, we want you to drive them away and come back. We actually had an altitude limit. We could go to we could follow the enemy to 18,000 feet. And if we hadn't shot them down, we had to break it off, come back up and escort. So that's what we were doing up through the time until Jimmy Doolittle took over. So when he arrived, he went down to 8th Air Force headquarters and walked in there, and he saw this big sign over the door that the mission of the 8th Fighter Command is to bring the bombers home safely, something like that. He said, "Who put that up there?" And General Kepner said, "I don't know. It was here when I got here." He said, "Well, tear it down. The mission of the 8th Fighter Command is to destroy the Luftwaffe." And he said, "From now on, you fighter pilots, we want you to, when you engage the enemy, follow them, take them to the ground and kill them." But we could also turn a squadron, perhaps, let them go out and freelance and see if they could find these huge formations of Germans that were concentrating, joining up in maybe 100, 200 airplanes and try to overwhelm the escort in one spot. The spring of 1944, I think most historians agree that that's when we broke the back of the Luftwaffe.
Where did fear ever figure into the equation of your flying all those missions over Europe?
Well, yeah, let's talk about fear. Naturally, there's some fear. There's a war going on, and you know, you might get killed, and so that gets your attention right away. Most of the fear would be just flying over enemy territory would create some emotion, because you knew if you went down there, we'd been bombing those folks and they weren't too happy with us. We'd known of some instances where the Germans had murdered air crews. We didn't want to bail out, that's for sure. If you got into an engagement, say single, you know, 1 versus 1, turning and turning and turning and trying to get on each other's tail, at that point, I really wasn't afraid. It's amazing. I think it was a survival thing and the adrenaline. You're trying to, you're trying to, well, you get to kill or be killed. And that's pretty motivating.
You lost many fellow pilots in combat. Personally, how did and how do you deal with that?
The loss of squadron mates is the big memories that I have. I have them today. We had 28 pilots in our original fighter squadron that deployed overseas together. 50% of them were either killed or prisoners of war. And I personally lost two of my good friends that I thought really a lot of, Jim Browning and Eddie Simpson. And I thought so much of them that I actually named my son James Edward Anderson after him. Simpson had, after I left on my first tour, flew a bombing mission, landed in Russia, flew a bombing mission, landed in Italy. And a new guy ran into him and they collided and had to bail out over France, which was still occupied by Germany, and joined up with the Free French. And they went with them into a remote forest location to have a ceremony to honor their Free French guys that were killed in combat. And the Germans got word about this, had sent an armed column out there to capture them. While they were leaving the camp as fast as they could, Eddie Simpson was in one of the last trucks that went out. And they could see that the Germans were coming too close. And so a Frenchman jumped out of the truck and with a machine gun, and Eddie jumped out with him and helped him. And they blew up the first car and blocked the road, just like a movie. But of course, the Germans overwhelmed them, and they were both shot. Jim Browning, on the other hand, volunteered for a second tour and didn't even go home. And it was near the end of the war, tragically, that he and Don Baquet were engaged in an aerial dogfight with two Me-262s. And Browning and the 262 were making head-on passes, playing chicken, and nobody chickened. And they collided, and both of them were vaporized in the crash.
How proud were your maintenance crews of their work on your airplanes?
Well, our ground crews were, my ground crew in particular, were fantastic. I flew that 116 missions, which is 480 hours and 20 minutes, I think, without a single abort, mechanical abort, or any kind of an abort for the whole time, which is an incredible record. And it's all due to my crew chiefs. And Otto Heino was my crew chief. And later I picked up my armor, Leon Zimmerman, Corporal Zimmerman. They weren't doing the dying, but they were doing the work too. So I can't say enough about the crew chiefs of the world. We couldn't do without them, and I had the best of the best. They kept me alive.
You cannot place statues or build memorials in thin air. These airplanes, rescued, restored, returned to the sky, are the memorials. Through them, we give enduring thanks to those who gave everything they had to defend everything that we hold dear. By sharing them, we remind each other of the sacrifice. By sharing them, we introduce our heirs to their heritage. One week each summer, these national treasures are flown here. Twice each day, those who restored them present them to those who risked their lives to fight in them. And those who really did it tell the rest of us how it really was. It is a singular series of history lessons that anyone who cherishes liberty ought to see.
For 20 years, Warbirds in Review has given you a rare glimpse into the past. Through planes, technology, and most importantly, through the tales of those who know these birds the best. The remaining few from the greatest generation who flew in and worked on these planes. For 1 week a year, we create a living museum that changes yearly and daily.
And all of a sudden, from out here, the B-17's down here, 3 ME-109s come in here. They're bellied up to us. You know, they didn't see us, obviously, because there was, you know, seven or eight of us. They're going after the straggler. So, okay, guys, I'm a flight leader. One of those is mine.
Warbirds in Review started as an idea born from the realization that any time an owner or pilot was out with their airplane, crowds appeared. What if we could capture this magic and share it with more people? What if we could get these experts to share their wisdom, knowledge, and their personal stories with anyone who was interested?
The idea for Warbirds in Review started several years ago. On our many trips to Oshkosh, we find that people are very interested in the airplanes. When you're pre-flighting an airplane or when you're working on it, the crowd would gather. And so we said, why don't we do a formal time frame to just allow people to come visit with the pilots. But initially, it was to have the aircraft owner in front of their airplane and set a time when people could come and know that they would be able to hear about the airplane. From that, it evolved into, well, if we're going to have the P-51 here and someone talk about it, and you have the old Crow airplane, wouldn't it be wonderful if people could hear Bud Anderson's story? Wouldn't it be wonderful if people could hear from Jack Roush how he restored the airplane? So from that idea, it has grown and to a point that maybe it's a little too hard to handle, but the rewards are great.
It started with a simple boombox, an aircraft stairs, and many impromptu lessons and tales. All of that has changed.
There were two things that made us, a lot of focus on us, was the fact that we were the first guys that ever defeated the Japanese. And so there was a lot, we were losing everywhere in the world at that time. This is in 41 and 42. Our deal was for a contract for a year, and our group broke up in July of 1942. But the whole key to our success was the tactics that General Chennault taught us. He just drilled into our head a very simple thing, and that is you don't turn with the Japanese aircraft. Because if you do, you're going to get shot down. If you think about turning, then you start to turn with that guy, you're going to bleed off some airspeed. You find out you can't turn inside of it. Then you try to break off, and even though you got a faster airplane, you can't spool up fast enough to get away. As a result of those tactics, we were paid for 297 airplanes, and we only lost 4 pilots in air combat. So it worked real good for us.
Today, visitors climb into the stands, eager to find a good seat so they can let the stories wash over them, so they can learn and listen to those who know these tales best because they lived them.
Dick, start us off, would you? There you were in the right seat of the B-25, the lead airplane to leave the aircraft carrier, April 18, 1942. And in the left seat, Lieutenant Colonel and Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle. What kind of a man was he, and how well did you know him at that point, Dick?
Well, David, back in 1990, I had written some little notes concerning my thoughts about Colonel Doolittle. And if you don't mind, yeah.
Oh, you go. He's always ahead of you, all the time.
Actually, Colonel Doolittle was 5'6", but the way I was able to put it together was he was short in stature, but tall on accomplishment. A man of integrity, honor, and courage. He excluded confidence, determination, and strength. He was intelligent, educated, and humble, great respect for others, led by example and inspiration to all, and we would have followed him anywhere.
For a moment, the years slip away and stories that haven't been told for decades are dusted off and shared with a new generation. Old tales that have been told repeatedly grow and are retold with emotion and meaning. Imaginations are sparked, and the truly brave few are willing to let in the lesson and learn so that history does not repeat itself.
The P-38 to the right. Connie just mentioned Ron and Diane Fagan from Minnesota. They are giant supporters of EAA and Warbirds in Review. Please welcome Ron Fagan and his son, Evan. Ron and Evan, would you come out, please? What is it like for you, as a young man, to fly this World War II airplane, especially the way you've configured it?
Well, it's an honor to fly it. Just to get to be around these has been an honor. But, Scat and Robin Olds, and I'm sure most of you have read his book. It's a pretty amazing life the guy had. Quite an American, and having an airplane with his name on it is an honor in its own. But P-38 for our family also takes a special meaning because my grandpa was on the 4th Infantry, first wave of Utah Beach, and always talked about how his group was pinned down and 2 P-38s came down and shot all the Germans, and he said he survived due to the P-38. So to get to fly the airplane, pretty big honor.
Ed.
Back to Normandy for a few minutes.
Okay. We're getting there.
I know that's old stuff to you people, but I'd like to tell you how I'm here. I got to the plane. I was on number 1 plane of 47 planes of the battalion. The commanding officer, he said, Shames, there's a correspondent that's sitting in your seat next to me, and you're going to be assigned to a different airplane. So he said, go to so-and-so plane. Today, I still don't know what plane I was on. Nobody has a manifest show the plane that I was on. I can't even prove that I jumped into Normandy. So when we got over Jersey and Guernsey, middle of the channel, we got flak. And we got across the channel, right on the mainland, and all hell broke loose. If you ever been to a night of fireworks, that's what it looked like. About 2 minutes, 3 minutes later, the green light came on, and I got up, everybody got up and started pushing, and I was shoving. We got just about everybody out, and the guy in front of me, he was carrying a 60-millimeter mortar on him. The guy in front of me slipped on the floor. Got him on his feet, hooked up, back hooked up, kicked him out of the airplane, and I jumped. It seemed like 3 hours because stuff was coming through my parachute, and you could hear the bullets and shrapnel coming through my parachute. A lot of people got killed on the way down. Finally, I didn't hit the ground at all. I hit a bunch of cows, as I said, and they start mooing. So I figured, I said, hell, if they start mooing, they must be ashamed. The Germans didn't know what was going on, so I started to moo too. I thought I would say that the plane that hit the target that night was the command plane of the battalion, and it landed right in the middle of a bunch of SS troopers. Half of the men on that plane were murdered, including the commanding officer of the battalion, and half of them were captured. The whole plane, that's the one that I was supposed to be on. Of the whole regiment, 506 Parachute Infantry Regiment, 35% of the officers never saw action because they were either killed, wounded, or captured. 35% of the officers. But then, of course, it struck us that we had a hell of a job. But they expected 60% casualties. So we did pretty good.
You know, when you think about it, how many times will we hear a first-hand account of what happened at Normandy? And we've just heard it right now.
A favorite at Warburds in Review is Bud Anderson, a triple ace of World War II, a fighter test pilot, wing commander in the Vietnam War, and a retired full colonel who went on to earn a well-deserved spot in the National Aviation Hall of Fame.
And all of a sudden, from out here, the B-17's down here, 3 ME-109s come in here. They're bellied up to us. You know, they didn't see us, obviously, because there was, you know, seven or eight of us. They're going after the straggler. And I've got this guy, but we're not in these nice concentric circles. And so I'm saying, I'm going to pull through him and then fire a burst out here and hope he flies through it. I'd been through 3 gunnery schools, and I knew how to shoot quail. You really want to get it back here at 6 o'clock and get into close to shoot somebody. So he comes around, I pull it through. I can't see him, of course, because I'm bellied up like this, and he's bellied up like this. I got tracked him very accurately, fired a long burst like that. Not a long burst, but a burst. And when he came into sight, he's cooling, is streaming. He's burst gray smoke just pouring out of him. Lucky shot. I got him with a golden BB. And he pulls up like this right there and bails out immediately. Yeah, man, I said, you know, I'm kind of sitting there cheering, and I looked out at my wing, and geez, here's a guy right on my wing. And it was Johnny England Air Force Base. You know where that is? That's the guy that was, that base was named after. He'd already had a couple of victories. And we were down low. He had his mask off, and he was laughing, and he went like this, and I thought, wait a minute, did that guy shoot that thing down out from under me? You know, I knew it was a lucky shot, and I just couldn't, and I thought, holy smokes, that wasn't very sportsmanlike, but I guess there's a war on. It's okay. It just kind of. I don't know. I got real disappointed. I thought, oh, yeah, I knew if I'd have hit it, it was lucky. Was he back here and shot that thing down and I didn't see him? And we go in, we have a briefing. I asked my wingman, he says, I was out of position. I couldn't see that, but I don't think he was there. And so I filed a claim and asked him to hold it. And they looked at me kind of funny when they said that. And I said, yeah, I got to talk to a guy and get a confirmation. So I head over to the club, and where he's in a different squadron, obviously. And so now I'm on the way over there, and I'm thinking, how the hell do I bring this up? I'm going to say, hey, you jerk, did you shoot that thing down out from under me? Or, how am I going to handle this without being a jerk myself? So I go in there, and there he is on the end of the bar, and he comes rushing over to me, and he says, Andy, he says, that's the greatest shot I ever saw. You got that sucker out there at 60 degrees angle off. I go like this, oh, Johnny, lucky shot. That's the story how Bud Anderson got his first victory.
Warbirds in Review is now more than just a place for a few to gather and listen. It's a celebration of those who sculpted history. It's a place for veterans to gather and reconnect, to share their experiences with others. Even the most versed in the past will not truly understand until they hear it from the people who lived it. As one WASP once put it, you may know our history, but you don't know our stories.
Schutze, start us off here. You're the star here today. What's your first memory of being interested in flying airplanes as a kid?
Boy, that's going back a long way.
Well, you just told me you were really 39, so it's not that long ago.
Well, you got to turn that one around. When I was 7, I said to my family, when I grow up, I'm going to learn how to fly. But I had the interest long before that.
What was your parents' reaction to your telling them that you wanted to fly?
You're crazy. Girls don't fly.
Boy, so what did you do? I mean, obviously you figured it out along the way. How did you go about it?
Well, I didn't really figure it out. I just knew I wanted to fly. I seen an airplane go by. And when I was a youngster, an airplane going by one every 10 days, that was a big traffic pattern. I just studied. After I learned how to read, I read everything I could on aviation. I even took my brother's Boy Scout magazine and read the articles on aviation there. I was really gung-ho.
So how did you get around your parents not wanting you to fly? I mean, you had to raise the money, you had to keep it from them. What did you do?
Well, they were very supportive. If you had a dream, they figured, try it. If you don't make it, at least you had a dream. No use going through life without a dream. When I reported for this ground school, I found out that there was a scholarship involved. 5 scholarships, of which only 1 could be a woman. There was only 2 women in the class, so I figured I had it made. But I also found out that the guys that were taking the course had taken it 3 or 4 times, so I figured they'd pass on perfect attendance. I took the private pilot's license at the end of the course, and the 5 highest scorer would get the flight scholarship, and I was one of the 5.
And then what happened?
They took it away from me.
What did they say when they took it away from you?
The war in Europe isn't going well. We need men. Women don't fly, so we're going to give it to number 6.
So what did you do to get around that?
I fought it tooth and nail. My argument was, you gave it to me. It's mine. You're giving it away. You're stealing it. So I think I made such a fuss, they gave it back to me just to shut me up.
Each person has a different story to tell, and it's only through all of them that we get the whole picture. Of course, we can't get all of their stories. Many are lost to war and time, and some simply will never be shared. But we can learn from the stories we have.
So where did it come from in you and your colleagues to be able to say, I will not only join to defend the country, but I'm going to join and fight racism? What did it take inside you to do that?
Well, I think number one, and I think the first thing that we were all thankful that we had parents and grandparents that said, go to high school, go to college, let's get an education. And that was a requirement when the war broke out to have that education, so that was important. In my own kind of growing up, I did learn, I guess you might say from a religious point of view, treat your neighbor as yourself, as you want to be treated. A little later, in my years, I was glad to be a Boy Scout. And I still say that if we all live by that Scout oath and those 12 Scout laws, trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. If we all, yes, indeed, folks, if everybody lived by those laws, we'd have quite a different country. But that was the type of thing that helped me, and I realized fighting doesn't solve an issue. You're bruised and you're still mad at each other. So it takes a little different way of living, and I think that's what sustained the majority of those that became a part of this first experiment, because the Army said we studied and we know it isn't going to work.
So that was the term. They called it the experiment.
Exactly. The experiment was authorizing the 99th Pursuit Squadron. Of course, the fine print to maintain segregation said all of the necessary support, taking care of still segregated overseas, but attached to white groups, but not at the same base.
In the history of the United States Air Force, Colonel McGee holds the record for flying the most combat fighter missions in 3 wars, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, 409. What are the challenges to our country today?
I put it in 4 P's: perceive, prepare, perform, persevere. But perceive, dream your dreams, but I like to add, as you find your talents, hopefully find something you enjoy doing, because hate to go to work every day, but hate what you're doing. But prepare, I say, get a good education, read, write, and speak well, but develop the talents that, we're losing some of that because they don't even teach kids how to write anymore in some schools. But prepare, perform. And I say let excellence be your goal in everything that you do. And tell the youngsters, never less than your best. Because if you're doing less than your best, you're letting yourself down, you're letting your family down, your community. But finally, persevere as we did. Don't let the circumstances be the excuse for not achieving. Can't beat that, I don't think. And that's what I like to pass on.
Ladies and gentlemen, Colonel Charles McGee.
Thank you kindly.
At times, surrounded by the support and the wide-eyed curiosity of others, veterans are prompted to tell tales they've never shared before. Sometimes families are hearing these stories for the first time, getting a deeper glimpse into their loved ones and what it truly meant to be at war.
The way the mission started out, you're going to go on your first mission now after we did some practicing around England. We flew into France. The first time that you see the flag starting to come up, well, that's, gee, look at that. You know, these little bursts around, and then you're looking over and you see a plane get hit, that goes down. But it was like a movie. It wasn't happening to you, it's just you're out there watching this thing. Kind of all hell is breaking loose around you. After the bombs are dropped, pilot took over, and you'd make your turn and get out of there. One thing I remember is well, I was 20 years old then. I wasn't really drinking by that time, but one of the things they did, take you in the briefing room, and right in the middle of the table was a bottle of old Overholt rye whiskey, and everybody had to have a couple of shots of that.
Well, my Uncle Jack and I have talked about some of his World War II experiences from time to time over the years, and I always thought that he was on a B-29 and he'd always correct me. Finally, I got it right that he was on a B-17 in World War II. And I was talking to some of my pals, Gary Weaver.
Gary Sinise, a venerable actor and director, has been a friend of the DAV since 1994. His performance in the movie Forrest Gump, his character as Lieutenant Dan Taylor, he said, "Gary, you got a B-25, that's wonderful, but you know anyone who has a B-17 or access to a B-17?" And I said, "Well, as a matter of fact, I do, believe it or not." He looked at me and wondered if I was just kidding with him. And then he went on to say, my uncle Jack, was a navigator on a B-17 during the war. And he flew 30 missions, survived those 30 missions, obviously. You think it would ever be possible that I could get him a ride on a B-17?
I said, but we got to keep it a secret. As I said to Uncle Jack, I said, okay, June 23rd, you're going to Texas. And so I told him that my band was going to play down here, and I wanted him to come and experience the concert. And, well, we fooled him as long as we could. We told Uncle Jack that we were recording his remembrances for an oral history project. At this point, he was still not aware of the surprise that awaited him.
You guys wouldn't tell me what this is all about. Well, look what we have right here.
You were a navigator, correct?
Right.
Well, we're getting ready to go fly, and our navigator called in sick today. So, would you do us the honor of going flying with us today?
You're going to actually go flying?
If you'll go.
Well, sure I'll go.
Well, Gary, would you like to go along?
I'll go.
Yes.
You want to go on a ride?
Sure I do.
I wanted to be right with Uncle Jack to sort of experience, his first time in the plane and be there when we took off. And just watching his face was pretty awesome.
One thing we've learned from these encounters is things aren't as they seem. Take Luftwaffe pilot Gunther Rahl. A pilot for the German army is first to say he was a Luftwaffe pilot, not a member of the Nazi Party. there was a difference, and it's through these differences that we can discover similarities.
First of all, you know, I have to say that today it's very easy Nazi officer. That's nonsense. An active officer was not allowed to be neither in the Weimar Republic nor with Hitler. He was not allowed to be a member of a party with the slogan, "The officer serves his country, not a party."
We would fly close formation 45 minutes ahead of the bombers into Frankfurt, and then we'd split up like this in a fan, and I was in this westernmost flight. We were supposed to fly 15 minutes and then do a reciprocal on that heading and come back. Well, I completed a 15 minutes, turned around to come back, and I heard everywhere I listened, everybody was seeing bogeys. The Germans were all over the place. And shortly after that, I looked in front of me, and there's a gaggle of 109, close formation, still had their tanks on. So with my flight of 4, I pressed the attack, and they saw us coming, and all of a sudden, all those tanks went off at the same time, and they don't go down like a bomb, they flutter. And I'd never seen that. That got my attention, but only for a short time, and I pressed on to make the attack. And they saw us coming, obviously, and then the whole gaggle did split S's. They went in every direction. And I picked out 2 and tied onto them, and away we go. Nothing could dive with the P-47. I pulled onto one to the left. They didn't move. They didn't do anything to evade me. I gave them a good burst. Smoke started to come from it, and the right gear fell out. So it started a slow spiral going down. I just had a little right rudder. Same thing happened to that one. His right gear fell out. And it was the 2 of them going spiraling down together. That was my 3rd and 4th of that day. So about that time, I looked over, and there's a 109 climbing up onto Hub Zemke's butt. And I called to him, and I said, "Break," you know. He said, "Where is it?" And like a dumb lieutenant, I said, "It's climbing right up under your ass." And I thought he'd get all over me when we got back to briefing, but he didn't say one thing about that. And I managed to just get a few short bursts around the cockpit. Excuse me, I didn't think I had him, but the airplane slid off to the right, and the pilot bailed out. And that was my 5th for the mission.
And then I was tumbling. I couldn't reach the handle. But, you know, when these arms and legs are swinging around, this is a stabilizing factor for you. And all of a sudden, it was quiet. I was looking how high, and I pulled, and here I was on the parachute. And then I recognized, I said, "Shorty, where's my thumb?" If there is a war, you have to serve your country. There's no doubt. And the other one on the other side, he serves his country.
I'll be all right. I'm a very emotional guy for a fighter pilot, I'll tell you. But I love this country. And every young person who lives here ought to be blessed to know that they've been so fortunate to be born here. And when the time comes, if you have to do your thing for your country, you better damn well step up to the bat and do it. Oh, 3 wars and I'm still here. I'm 88. I feel fine. I'd go to tomorrow and fight, but I wouldn't fight against Gunther. We're friends.
I know.
The success and popularity of Warbirds in Review, along with the dwindling numbers of World War II veterans, opened our eyes to the importance of celebrating other veterans in other wars and documenting their history as well.
I got home about the last day of September, 1st of October, on a Friday. My family in Washington, and I'm on leave. Phone rang Saturday. Said, get over here to the Pentagon. Chief of Staff wants to see you Monday morning. I said, I'm on leave. He said, doesn't matter, the chief wants to see you. I said, yes, sir, okay. I reported into his office. He's the one that walked up to me and said, take off that mustache. Yes, sir. The next thing I knew, he briefed me, and I'm in the Oval Office of the White House. You know, God, me? LBJ was the president. So I'm sitting on the end of a couch. He's on an easy chair, and his aide, a colonel, Air Force colonel, was sitting on my right. And Mr. President said, welcome home, Colonel. You did well. Thank you very much, sir. He said, well, what's it like to be home? That was the weekend that thousands and thousands of hippies marched on the Pentagon. I said, sir, who are all those funny-looking people that marched on the Pentagon yesterday? And I'm going to quote for you folks. He said, I got 240,000 boys over there in Vietnam. When those boys come home, they'll tell the American public what's happening. And I thought, wait a minute. That's your job, not mine. Well, of course, you don't say that. So the best thing I could think of to come up with, sir, I've been home since Friday. Been to a couple of dinner parties. No one asked me where I've been or what I've been doing for the past year. In case somebody does ask, what would you like me to tell them? I'm thinking, end of career. He glared at me, and then he said, well, Colonel, you tell them, I'm quoting, that we are preventing the North Vietnamese from interfering in the democratic process in South Vietnam. I said, I'm sorry, sir, I can't say that. Well, why not, Colonel? Well, sir, if that's why we're there, I don't want to be the one that spreads the word. Ooh. It was grim for a few minutes, but I hand the man full credit. He let me talk. He listened. I maintain we had every reason to be there, but we went about it improperly under the leadership of McNamara and Johnson.
Our standard was we're off the ground in 2 minutes. That's it, 2 minutes.
So I came in, I hit the spot, got down on the ground, safe, and here were the true heroes in that. My crew chief and medic looked at me and I said, go get them. And they were sitting in a minefield, nobody's moving. Everybody's dead or wounded. They start running through the minefield, and they're carrying the patients back to the aircraft. And I'm sitting in the right seat looking out the door, and boom, they step on a mine or set off a mine. And they got a great big guy on a litter, and I think he saved my 2 guys. The rest of the shrapnel went into the aircraft and him, and the concussion just blew them up in the air. They land, they put him on the aircraft, and they go back and get the rest of the patients.
Each story is a personal chapter. Many are shared with others but told from different perspectives. One thing that remains constant, no matter who the narrator is, the supporting characters in battle and in aviation are as important as the main character. Without them, the telling of the story wouldn't be possible. No matter the era, the stories resonate.
So what happened that day?
So it's the 7th mission that day you're referring to, I'm assuming, is Black Hawk Down, October 3rd, 93. Right. The mission that day is to go capture 2 top 10 personnel. We'd already captured the number 2 guy, and we'd captured 25 others. So we had 26 already in prison. About 40 minutes in, we lose our first aircraft, and it was Super 6-1.
And how many aircraft were there?
There were over 20 on the mission. So that's when I got called in to replace that first aircraft. So when you get called in to replace somebody who just got shot down, I mean, that's it's not going to be a good day. We roll in, we made it around about 3 times when we got hit by an RPG. And the RPG hit just underneath that big round gearbox casing that you can see right there. And it essentially blew everything off from that point up. The only thing you can do in that situation is shut the engines off, which is not something you really want to do either. But you have to get control of the aircraft. And somewhere during that process, we hit the ground. And
so when you hit, who was injured? Anyone?
Oh, we were all injured very bad, yeah. We hit so hard that my right femur actually snapped off on the seat, just the pure G-forces of the impact. And then my vertebrae were crushed in my spine. Not the discs, but the actual bones themselves smashed into each other, and one compressed 30%, so what a compression fracture is. So we fought the enemy off for, I'd say, maybe 15 minutes. Gary Gordon goes down first. Randy then comes back around, and I think at that point, it's just me and Randy. I don't think anybody else is left. I've shot all my ammunition. He gives me Gary's weapon. He grabs the crew chief's weapons from the aircraft and goes back around, makes his last stand. They estimate, there's hundreds of Somalis here. So it's a matter of seconds before he just can't hold them all off. So he's killed, and then they overrun the site. Initially, pretty certain they're going to kill me because they're all out of control, angry and violent, and there's nothing you can do. I mean, you can't run, you can't hide, got no ammunition left. So I basically accepted my fate. So they descended on me and started to beat me to death. I mean, they broke my nose, my cheekbone, my eye socket. They were ripping all my gear off. They realized I had value as a prisoner, stopped the madness, fired shots in the air, got control of the mob, and brought me into captivity. And then when they made the video and it aired, obviously everybody knew that I was in captivity. But then the president sent the former ambassador, a gentleman named Robert Oakley, and he met with him and he said, you got 2 choices. And I heard him tell this story to me more than once. He said, I told him you could keep him in captivity or you can let him go. If you keep him, sooner or later we're going to figure out where he is and we're going to come rescue him. And when we do, we're coming with everything we got. And he had credibility, so when he said that, the Somalis said, I think the best course of action is let him go. And within 48 hours, they let me go.
Wow.
Minus 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9. We have ignition sequence start. The engines are on. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Two young men had a dream many years back, and their dreams took them around the moon.
For all the people back on Earth, the crew of Apollo 8 has a message that we would like to send to you. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God called the light day. And the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. And from the crew of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good earth.
Decision was made somewhere that you all were going to read from the book of Genesis Christmas Eve. Was that a long-term plan that came from the government?
Well, we were in the middle of training. I got a call from NASA PR, and they said, well, you're going around the moon on Christmas Eve. You'll be a television program, and you'll have the largest audience that's ever listened to a human voice. And I said, good, what's on the program? And they said, and this was another wonderful thing about America, that the only instructions that we got was do something appropriate.
Was there any pushback when you got back to Earth?
We were sued.
What?
We were sued for combining government and religion together.
Oh, First Amendment?
Yeah. And so when the three of us went to give a report to the combined all of Congress and the Supreme Court and everything, that was mentioned, and the Supreme Court said, "Don't worry about it, we'll take care of it." Couldn't ask for a better lawyer.
Your position is good, Joe.
Actually, Joe didn't fly the T-34 that much, but he did fly some other things that I think people would be interested in. Space Shuttle X-15. So, Joe, tell us about a typical mission in the X-15.
The mission itself lasted anywhere from 10 to 12 minutes, depending on whether it was a speed flight. Normally it'd be about 10 and a half minutes long, because you burn the propellant out full throttle, and the propellant was gone in a minute and a half. The engine would burn for about 88 seconds, and then you're out of fuel. The rest of it was just coasting and deceleration and getting data. And you would decelerate because you were only at about 110,000 feet, so there was a good bit of drag. The altitude flights lasted at least 12 minutes long, because you were arcing over the top, literally in space, above the atmosphere, and it would just take that long to arc up over the top, make the re-entry, and then set up and land. So both missions lasted in the neighborhood of 10, 12 minutes. About a minute and a half apart. It's really hard to build up flying time in that X-15 at 10 minutes of flight. But it was a very exciting airplane to fly. It was an honest airplane, and you felt comfortable in it, except in a few instances when you got close to the edge of the envelope, and either during the re-entry or at very high speeds.
It is through the looking glass of time that we see the human drive to explore and innovate. Aircraft innovations don't just come from the large corporations and the military.
Dick Rutan, U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel, retired, 20 years active duty, soloed at 16, 325 missions in Vietnam. He is a founding member of the Misties, flying the F-100 as a forward air controller. He was shot down and rescued, highly decorated with 5 Distinguished Flying Crosses, Silver Star, 16 Air Medals, and the Purple Heart. He and Jeannie Yeager set the world record flying brother Burt Rutan-designed Voyager non-stop, unrefueled, around the world.
So how accurate is it, the thought that you and Burt were sitting in a coffee shop or restaurant and he sketched it out on a napkin? Is that accurate?
No, that's accurate. In fact, most great airplanes start either in a restaurant or in a bar with a drawing on a napkin. That's kind of traditional.
How much did it go from the napkin to the realization of what he had to do in terms of design to make that happen, even though he understood carbon fiber could potentially make it happen?
Well, up until it's a good question. Up until the time we met in the restaurant, he never put pen to paper or even worked out any kind of numbers and all the formulas those genius designers use to do airplanes. He never did any of that. And this was kind of a concept that he had in his mind. And thank goodness the Voyager ended up to be looking nothing like what he drew on the napkin that day.
Oh, really?
Oh, he's got 3 knots and he's got 4,000 feet to go. 87. Still touching. And the wings come. She's gonna go. She's gonna go. Holy cow, look at that. Come on, Nick. Get it up. Woohoo! God, I thought it wasn't gonna do it, Mike. I don't believe it.
Warbirds in Review has been there to document celebratory moments, grave danger, and the incredible innovations. And yet, it seems there's always time for good-natured humor.
I'd like to tell you one quick story. The sayings that Tex Hill had were just wonderful. We have been at many black tie occasions with Tex, and on one occasion I happened to wear a red dress. And Tex, at no loss for words, I walked out of the room, and there he is, and he said, "Oh, you make a bulldog break his chain." I think that was a good thing for Tex, but that's just so typical of Tex. And one word about Robin is that he was a great combat leader. He gave a speech in a spaghetti factory restaurant one night, and he had us all ready to join up and follow him anywhere. So he was a great leader. Again, it's my pleasure, and I can't. I have to thank Ed because the many hours and the many long nights that I spend working on this. Ed's very patient, very supportive, and a lot of help. And to all the other volunteers, Danny, Sam Bass, they do a wonderful job with the moderating. So this is not a one-man show, but it does take a lot of work. But you are what makes it all worthwhile. Thank you, guys.
Of course, the people, pilots, and veterans are a key element to the success of Warbirds in Review, but it's also about the planes. As the pilots fly west, the aircraft are left behind to be discovered by new owners. These new owners and pilots become the modern stewards of the next generation. It is their mission to carry the plane forward for future generations and to make sure the songs these warbirds sing continue to be heard. At Warbirds in Review, we are proud of the moments we have been able to capture and share over the last 20 years. But we couldn't have done any of it without the veterans and their willingness to share their stories. The aircraft owners who work carefully to restore and maintain these flying pieces of history for future generations. The support we get from Scott's Miracle-Gro and the Fagan Fighters World War II Museum. The countless Warbirds volunteers who give so much more than just their time and talents to our organization. And the Warbird enthusiasts who come in increasing numbers every year. Why is there still passion for these warbirds? What do they mean to people, and why do they keep coming to see these magnificent metal birds and to hear their stories? Perhaps it's best summed up by the legendary World War II pilot and former POW, Bob Hoover.
When you first lose your freedom, and I've said this to so many young people, you don't know what we have here in this country till you can't see that red, white, and blue flag. You don't know what that stands for. That's freedom.
America, land that I love, stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light From the mountains to the prairies to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home sweet home. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home sweet home. From the mountains to the prairies to the oceans white with Welcome home and thank you. Thank you very much.